For the beginning of this wrap, I'm going to start with 3 pieces of 18 gauge round soft copper wires. They're cut to 16 inches long, and I'm going to give you a quick example of what we're doing and why I'm about to mark the wires the way that I am. So I'm starting with 16 inches in all 3 lengths. I'm going to put a mark at the very center of the wires, and that basically is this point right here on the wires. I'm going to measure over 3/4 of an inch to the right and then 3/4 of an inch to the left and mark the wires. The reason I'm doing 3/4 is because this is quite a large stone, so I need a nice big bend here to help hold the back in. 3/4 gets the point of it to about the center of my stone. Yours might be a little different if your stone is different, a different size. So from that mark, those 2 marks, I'm going to go over 1 1/4 inches and make a mark to the right, and then I'll go 1 1/4 inches and make a mark from the very last one on the left. What those marks are the weaving areas. So from that last 3/4 inch mark, we marked 1 1/4 inches. For this size stone, that gets me around this corner for my weave and just to the very top. Okay? So that's the logic behind these marks, and yours might be slightly different dependent on the size of your stone. But now you understand why we've marked them the way we have. I'll take this stone out of here because it's the one I'm actually going to wrap. Our 3 wires are going to just go over our weaved wires. When we weave them, are going to go just over the soft shoulder of the stone, so that last wire is just on the edge of it, and the 3 wires make kind of this little cup, right? You see how it's a little bit of a slant over the soft shoulders of the stone. So keep that in mind when we're working this. That's what you want your wires to do when they come up. And this particular stone is 1 1/2 inches long by 1 1/4 wide. It's quite thin. It's about 4 millimeters thick, and it's got sloping edges. Sloping. And they can have a hard cut edge here too, but this particular one is sloping. This is a really great weave for that. So our weaving area then, we're going to leave the center here bare because that's this V flip, and we're going to weave from, these marks right here out and this one right here out. So the outside 1 1/4 inch is what we're going to weave, and that is from here to here, from the bend to the top of the stone. And you'll see more as we go. If you want to tape these wires together, you can, to keep all your marks the same. My wires were a little bit off cut, so my marks are slightly slanted, but I can just fix that with a little rearrangement of the wires. And I'm going to put a little spot of tape way down here off of my weaving space to help me out. So I've got my marks all nice and lined up, and I'm just going to put a spot of tape right here to help me hold the wires together while I weave. Change my camera focus. Okay, and I'm going to start weaving right here, and I'll weave this 1 1/4 inch. I'll skip the entire middle, and then I'll weave from here over 1 1/4 inch. For this little segment of weave, I'm going to start with 24 inches of 28 gauge wire, and I'll just call my frame wires 1, 2, and 3. So 1 is the bottom, 2 is the middle, 3 is the top. I'm going to go overhanded on the entire weave. So I'm going to insert my weaving wire from underneath and give myself a leading 1 inch to hold on to. And I'm going to start by making 5 single coils on frame wire number 1, so the very lowest one. There's 1. Push up with the weaving wire to pre-bend it. There's 2. This is the pre-bend, and then you go between wires 1 and 2 to make the coil. That's 3. There's 4. And there's 5. And I'm starting my weave right at my marks. Push them together, make them side by side. From here, I'm going to jump over frame wire 1 and 2. I'm going to pass through to the back. When I come back to the front, I'm going to come through wires 2 and 1. And I will have made a loop, a double loop, a double wrap between wires 1 and 2. Then I'll go up, do a complete 360 around all these wires and come all the way back down to the bottom, below wire number 1. And then I'll come up and I'll wrap wires 1 and 2. Okay, so basically you're doing 3 coils, but they're over 2 frame wires. So 1 coil over 1 and 2, then we jumped up and did 1 coil over 2 and 3, came all the way back down the back, and then wrapped again wires 1 and 2. Okay, and so I'm right here. Now I'll continue the segment with ending it with 5 single coils on wire number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I'll just repeat this. I'll push everything together, and then I'll go all the way up to wrap wires 1 and 2. And when I come back through to the front, I'll come around wire number 2. I'll go up and all the way over 2 and 3. Come all the way down underneath wire number 1. Go back up and wrap frame wires 1 and 2. Push everything together. And then I'll end it with 5 single coils on frame wire number 1. 3, 4, and 5. This is 2 repeats. Okay? 5 single coils, 3 doubles, 5 singles, 3 doubles, 5 singles. That's 2 repeats. And now I'll go for number 3 repeat. I'll wrap wires 1 and 2. I'll come back through 2 and 1 so that I can go up and wrap 2 and 3. I'll come all the way back down below wire number 1 and back up to wrap 1 and 2. Come back down and do 5 singles along number 1. And I'll do enough repeats to get me to this mark. It'll be about 12 of them. goes 12. And this should be my last repeat. There might be one more. I'll see when I look at my marks. And you should almost be out of weaving wire. There is probably 6 inches here left. And I'm just going to carefully push all my weave back with my fingers and make sure my gaps are nice and closed. I don't want to use my plier just yet because I have some bending left to do, but I can take some flat nose if you feel like you need to give light taps, and just, tap at each weave here if you feel like you need to, but don't give a whole lot of pressure just yet. Okay, so 12 gets me right about there. I might do one more just for the heck of it because I have the weaving wire, and one more should about run me out, so we'll do 13. And this was 2 feet of 28 gauge that we started with. You can see that 2 feet only got us 1.25 inches here, so sometimes weaving can be deceptive. How much wire goes into a tiny little space. There's 4 and 5. And I'll just end it with that, and now I'm going to cut 2 more feet of 28 gauge. I'm going to skip the entire middle section because that's where we want to bend it, and I'm going to start weaving right here at the last 1.25 inches that we marked. Okay, and I don't have to do anything but count. I did 13 repeats here, so I'll just do 13 repeats on this side and make it even. Your weaving wire should remain nice and straight as you're working. Don't hold on too tight. Don't get too tight of a grip going so that everything behind you bends. It's kind of like knitting. You're just holding your hands lightly together, but under control. So I can get rid of these 2 little fragments. I'll do that just by giving some tension and then making big circles until it snaps, or of course you can cut it off. Make this last coil live right there, and I'll just take my cutter and cut it right in here as tight as I can get it, and then pat that little cut down. So 2 more fresh feet of weaving wire. This weave has a direction, so what I like to do is just put an X on the front of the tape so that I know this is the front of the weave. This side of the weave has a different pattern, so if you flip this over and you weave, you're going to have 2 different patterns on both sides, of your weave. So we want to stay facing the same side and just continue our weave at the next mark and weave for 13 repeats. So let's cut 2 feet of 28 gauge and do that. And I'll just start over here on my mark by anchoring 1 inch of my weaving wire. Make sure I'm in the right spot. And I'll do 5 single coils on the lower wire to get started. It's only squirrely until we get this first segment in here. And again, I'm leaving my center marks bare. So I've got my 5 coils. I'll jump up and wrap frame wires 1 and 2. Come back through underneath frame wire 2 and jump up so I can wrap frame wires 2 and 3. Then I'll come all the way back down. Don't pull so hard that you close the space. And then come back up and wrap wires 1 and 2. Once that first segment's in there, it'll be easier to keep these spaces. And then I'll just continue. This is 5 singles on the bottom, and then this is the first segment. 3, 4, 5, and that's one segment. And I will do 12 more repeats for a total of 13 so that I match this side. And while I work, you just want to maintain your nice wires. Don't crush them. You know, they're round, so they want to do this. Just help maintain, you know, keep them maintained. Or you can put another spot of tape right here, and that'll help too. All right? So do 13 total repeats, so 12 more, and I'll see you right here. And just look at your marks and make sure you're positioned where you are supposed to be, and then keep weaving. The weaving wire gets short. Sometimes you have to start passing it through. And one more. I've just barely got enough of my weaving wire, just like on the opposite side. Whoop. And I finish it off with 5 of them. Push all your weave together. And now make sure that, you know, you look to your marks. Make sure that you didn't slide off of this one too far. Everything's looking good. Sometimes, like I said, as we're weaving, the weave wants to shift. So you just push them back. Let's get rid of these 2 fragments of wire. Just going to cut them off right there deep in the crevices, and that's that. Okay, make sure everything's laying nice and flat. And right here at the center, let's get some flat nose pliers out. Got my 2mm flat nose. You could use your wider 4mm. And just right here at the approximate center, eyeball each side. You know, put your plier where it's most center, and we're going to make a 90-degree bend. So brace with your thumb and bend the entire stack 90 degrees. Tap the other side just like that. And now all we're going to do is lay them flat. This is what's going to be the oddest part. But right here, take your plier and just roll them all forward. So right here, I'll do it again so we can see. We just made our 90-degree bend. And right here with your plier, don't push too hard. Just kind of straddle all 4 of them and roll the plier forward on your finger. Flatten all of them out, and then use your thumb and finger to assist the weave over into a flat position, just like that. So you've got now a nice flat weave that is bent at 90 degrees. And when I hold my stone up to it, I can see that, you know, it's going to bend right here and right here to the back, and that should work out really nicely. I'm going to curve these two weaved sides first. It'll make it, I think, a little, for me, it's a little bit easier. Okay, so I like to, I'll show you up here close. You'd be down here on your mat. Actually, let me change my camera. Okay, a nice trick to get the stone to hold steady is to take a piece of tape, roll it inside out on itself so that it's all sticky sides out. Put your stone on it. Lay your stone down on a logical, you know, block of the grid here. So I can see that, whoop, here's my center. This stone's not quite symmetrical, but that'll help me hold on to it there. So just get it laying nice and symmetrical within your lines. You'll bring your wire up, make sure that the point is on center, and then not outside of the stone, but just above the stone is where you actually want to be, so that you're capturing the soft shoulder. So I'll hold the point right here at the center, and I'll just work one at a time. You know, my last wire here is almost at the edge of my stone right there. It's a little squirrely. I've got this side held onto with my pinky and braced, because as I push on this side wants to move. So we want that side to stay still, and you can use your thumb to help you, or your finger here to help you. Just try to turn the weave in, little as you go, and trace the shape of the stone. Whoop, and keep this on center. It's a little hard to do, but we have room for adjustments, so just like that. Okay, I'll hold this side steady. I'm just on the soft shoulder of my stone, and I'll repeat with this side. Get onto the soft shoulder of the stone, and then just use your finger over here. This is kind of how I do it. Keep your wires flat and just turn into the shape of the stone. And again, don't stress. Keep your point on center. Just get like that. Okay. You'll make sure that they crisscross up here at center, and that's fairly even. So just work them. I'll pick mine up here in a second so you can have a close-up of this. And these three wires should be just cupped over the soft edge of your stone. So when I pick this up, let me give you a close-up now. You can see the fit. These wires are just running the edge of my stone. Let me turn it over. Ooh, and here's the front of my wire. So I actually, and that's okay because we haven't done anything yet. So I can just as easily, ooh, glad I caught that. And that's why we do that. I could just as easily go this direction now. I haven't made any critical bends yet. And that's why the X. All right, so I've bent this over the soft shoulders here. And I just want to make sure that my bends look nice and even, and that they cross at the top center, and that my two weaves hit, you know, the bottom of the stone evenly. So this one needs to come over a little bit more. And I'm in the air here too, so it's a little bit harder, but let me flip this over so you can see. When I flip this over, you know, if I let go of the stone, these two sides of the wire should hold on to, you know, should cradle it. It shouldn't fall through. So the edges of your wire should be right at the edges of your stone, and the weave should be even to both shoulders. And again, you can make these adjustments here on your desk where it's a little easier for you. I'm going to turn it this way so I can work with it. with my strong hand here, put my point on center. Sometimes, you know, it's easier to work towards your strong hand versus straight up and down like I just did for the camera's sake. And just shape these until these two shoulders, I'm going to go ahead and take my tape off now that I know which side I got. Just shape it so that these two shoulders are sculpted nice to the curve of your stone, and that they land pretty evenly up here with some spacing so that you have the top of your stone showing. And then make sure to, that the weave is nice and pulled back tightly and that this bend is fairly even on both sides. You can adjust this weave and move it slightly, 1 or 2 millimeter if you need to. I hope you could see that I just lowered that weave a little bit. And up here you see pushing the weave up a little bit. So while it might not look even right away, you got to make sure to, get your weave nice and tight. And then I'm just focused to see that I'm fairly even here. What's important is that our shoulders are covered from the bottom of the weave here at the bottom of the stone to just the temples of the stone up there. Okay, and that's pretty good there. And I'll show you the back again so you see how it should sit. And just like that. It's a little squirrely still because it's round wire, but just like that so that you can see just the edges of the stone there. Okay? And now we're going to bend these wires up, but that's pretty squirrely, so we'll put some tape around this whole thing and help us out. So let's get about 3 or 4 inches of tape here. So get up here on your stone like this and get your weave on it just the way it's supposed to be. And then just fold the tape down on it. Make sure that you can see this whole bottom situation. Okay, and that's pretty good. All right, and this is just temporary. You still have to hold on to these wires when you bend everything, so don't think the tape is going to do much. It's just keeping it from being slippery. All right, so the edges of my weave are right here at the edges of my stone, and my wires covering the soft shoulders. And again, don't stress it because we have room for adjustment. Brace these two sides of the weave. Put your pressure on the back of the stone. Hold this weave, hold that weave, and then start the bend. Okay, you don't want to put a lot of pressure on your stone while you're bending these. So you can get pliers to help you if you need. I start with 1 wire at a time, the back wire, bend it as close to the stone as you can, get it into a nice curve, and then just push it down the back. Okay, just like that. Do the next one, get it nice and close on each edge of the stone, and then just take it down and push down. Right? That's enough that we can take the tape off, and I like to do that because I like to get a visual on where I'm at. The tape always makes me nervous because I can't see. So this way you can see too what it looks like there. Should make like a little envelope, just like that. Now, the trick with this last one here is if your stone is fairly thin like mine and you want the bottom bare, you can flip it to the back. All right. If your stone has a lot of depth to it and it's fairly thick, you might need a little more support up in the front, in which case you could actually bend this one to the front. In my case, I'm going to bend it to the back because that's where I want it. But if you're working with a much thicker stone, sometimes you can you know, get some additional support by bending it to the front, just an FYI. All right, so I'm going to hold everything steady, making sure that my stone is not shifted from where I had it last. And I'm just going to bend this last wire over, and I'm going to watch the front to make sure it wants to push up a little bit, and that's quite all right. Bend it all the way over and tuck it right there. And that should be nice and clean. When you flip it over, it should be a nice clean little envelope for your stone right there. And now if you need to adjust these to make them a little more graceful, you know, just take your thumb and do that. It's still squirrely, right? But get these looking the way you want them to. Mine are quite fine. The weave should end right here at the upper temples and should be even, right? So one shouldn't be longer or closer than the other. So when I bend them back, I've got 1.25 inches and 1.25 inches, and they bend back almost above where the bottom bends are. Okay, so I'll just turn this whole thing around. Make sure that the stone stays nice and snug, and I'm going to start with the wires underneath. It's a little squirrely. You know, again, if you want, you can put the tape there, but we have to turn over right onto the space of the tape. So holding everything as it should be. I got my finger on there. My stone edges are on my wires. And these are 3 18 gauges, so they're thick. So I can do one at a time. Start with the first one. Just make a nice, you know, turn down. Take the second one right next to it. We'll get it closer sooner in a minute. And take the third one down. Keep this weave on the soft shoulder of your stone. Don't pull so much that you pull off the stone. Okay? And then take this one at a time and just make the curve so that you're kind of sloping off the stone right here. And all 3 wires are on this half of the stone, right? So you have room for these 3 to come down. So when I look at it in the front now, it's a nice beautiful curve and a nice beautiful turn on the top. Okay? It's a very secure hold. It's just a little slippery when you get started. When these 3 wires come down, then it's right as rain. Okay, so make sure that edge is right there. Do 1 wire at a time. It'll be easier for you now. Make sure you're up against the stone. Just make your curves nice and even. One right after the next. Just like that. And these are still, my coils are still visible just to the edge of my stone. And that should feel very, very snug already. And we haven't even tied anything together yet. Okay, make sure everything's laying down nice and flat. Don't put too much pressure on your stone, but it should, you know, it should feel like it's in there. And then if you need to turn these tips at all, you can just use your fingers, or you can slip the stone out still, and you can put a tiny little down turn on the tips of these wires if you need to. The back should look like that, and here goes the front. And that looks beautiful. And either side really could be the top, depending on where you want to drop your loops. In my case, this is going to be the top of my stone where it's open a little bit more, and down here will be the bottom. So we just flip those 2 wires over. It's real important to keep all this weave more to the, you know, on the stone here at the bottom, because it tends to want to, you know, part from the stone there. So you just keep them pushed over, and they'll stay better once we get the 2 inside wires weaved together. So I just want to see my coil, you know, on the edges of the stone there. Just going to hold everything with my fingers. It's still a little slippery. And just take the center wires and bring them a little bit closer together like that so that we can weave them. Make sure that they are nice up here where it's going to be visible on the front of the stone. Same thing with these next 2. Just scooch them over. I got my thumb up here to hold everything. I got my fingers on both sides. And I'm just going to scooch them a little bit closer together down the center there so that I can weave them. Okay, just like that. I'll weave them together for a little bit here and then I'll pull them out a little bit more. Okay, you just want to check the front, make sure that those little adjustments didn't change anything. It looks beautiful. Okay, and now let's get 2 feet of 28 gauge and start weaving up the back. So that's another 24 inches of 28 gauge weaving wire. I've got 24 inches of 28 gauge weaving wire, and I'm just going to do a 1/1 weave to attach all of these wires together. I'll insert my 1-inch lead right here. There's a good place to start, right here at the end of this coil. And I'll just make about 10 wraps to get me to here, to get me past the curve so that I can get, into all of them there. Just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, now I'll just come up. I'll do a complete 360 around the frame wire right above. I'll leave a little gap. It doesn't need to be super tight. I'll go up, make a 360 around the wire above it. Just keep this weave from slipping. Go up and 360 around the next frame wire. Up and 360 around the next frame wire. And go up and 360 around this last frame wire. To get them all together. And then just, you can jiggle them with your fingers and make nice spacing between them. Once you get 1 stitch across all of them, double check the front, everything looks good. You don't have to go 1 stitch back down, just pass underneath all of them. Make a long stretch back down to the bottom wire. And then coil, do 1 wrap over 1 frame wire all the way back up for a second row. They'll want to slip, it's okay. Just keep weaving and push them back. Try to keep your tension even. Try to bring the wires together evenly as you weave so that the gaps are fairly consistent. They don't have to be perfect. Okay, I'll go all the way back down. Just push them all back with my fingers, and I'll do another repeat. Change my camera so you can see it a little better. Okay, so just 1/1. This is the Elton weave, the Elton ring. 1 wrap over 1 frame wire. So there's my last 360, and then I'll slide all the way down to the bottom. And I'll do a 360 around each frame wire going all the way back up. 3, 4, okay, and I'll come all the way underneath them, all of them, all the way back down to this side, and I'll repeat again. all the way underneath them. Okay, and right about midway along the stone, I'm going to split them back up into 3 and 3. So I'll just take a curve with these 3, and I'll continue this weaving wire along these 3, and I'll attach once I get to these V-shaped frame wires here. I'll sew a few stitches in, and then I'll get a fresh piece of 28 gauge and I'll do the opposite side. So I'll continue right here, and you can do whatever weave pattern you want. I'm going to change this pattern to go a little faster, and I'm going to do 2 coils over 2 frame wires. So I'm down here, I'll do 1 coil just to get anchored for my last patterns on these. And then I'll go up and I'll go over wires 1 and 2. I'll do that twice. Maintain a little space between them so you can get back through. Once I get 2 wraps there, I'll come between them. I'll go up and I'll do 2 wraps along these 2 frame wires, the center one and the top one. My second wrap, I'll come all the way back down to the bottom below number 1 again. And then I'll go up and I'll wrap 2 twice around 2 frame wires. So there's 1. There's my second one. And when I come back from my second one, I'm going to come back between them so that I have 2 wraps on those 2 frame wires, and I'm set up to jump up and do 2 wraps on these 2 frame wires. Okay. This is another weave pattern. It moves really quickly. Whoop, I forgot to go all the way down. So it's a good way to, well, it's just another weave that you can learn, but it's a good way to move quickly where, you know, you might just want some utility stitching here like this. And once I get to the place where I can attach, like right here, I'm going to go up and make 2 wraps along these 2. But when I come back through, I'm going to come between them so that I can, you know, be facing this last wire here. And just to make it easy, rather than going through one of them, I'm just going to lap through all of them. So, got one big triple stitch right there. It's actually got 4 of them, the top of this one and then those 3. And then it's still open over here, so it's easy for me to come back through there and do 3 or 4 of these all the way through for 2 coils, and back through the top 2, all the way through them again, pass under all of them, There's 3 of them. That's probably enough. And then my wire is right down here again, so I can continue even in this same pattern. There's 2 wraps. A wrap around 2 frame wires. With my second one, I'll come through them, jump up, wrap these top 2 frame wires. I don't need to go through those V's anymore. I'm nicely attached. So I'll just focus on these. Come back down to the bottom 2. Make 2 wraps around the 2 frame wires. But on the second one, jump through them so that you're set up to wrap the top 2. And then if I want a loop for a bale, right here is where I would do it, or I could have done it down here also, right? You don't have to always do it this one way. So I'm going to bend after these 4 repeats right here. I'm going to just get these 3 wires to more of a horizontal position, just like that. I'll take this upper wire, and right in that little crevice, I'll make a tiny little loop. Put my thumb right there, bend the wire straight up, right, and take it over itself into a little loop. And bring the wire back out to meet these 2. If you need to use your round nose plier to help you clean that loop up, do that. Turn it all the way so that this wire comes back above those 2. And then just straighten it back out. Make sure that, it doesn't collide too much right there because you got to weave. Okay? Well, you don't have to weave, but I'm going to weave so they are attached. So you got a little loop for your jump ring right there. Take a flat nose plier, straighten it out, flatten it out there so that it's nice against the stone. It's not visible or barely visible when I look at it in the front, depending on if you want it to be or not. And I have just a little bit of weaving wire left. I'm going to go ahead and continue a few stitches until I get just past the loop. So staying in pattern, I'll do 2 wraps around this lower 2 wires. Come back through them. I'm going to do 2 wraps on this upper one and get myself next to the loop. Whoop. I'll do 2 wraps on the lower ones. And now this side, this time, I'm going to just make it stretch a little bit and come to the right hand side of the loop. I'll wrap twice there. Here's the tight spot. So make sure you got a little gap right there in case you want to continue to weave, because you do. And get 2 wraps right there. And then here's where I'm going to go ahead and switch the pattern. So that little loop's locked in. I'm locked into the V, and I'll end this short fragment with a couple of singles on this bottom one. I am still to the inside of my stone here, so if I look to the front, I don't see anything I just did. Right? And I'm set up now to do whatever I want with these 3 wires. I can weave them, I can weave 2 of them and coil 1 of them, etc., etc. So we'll just leave it right there. And now, if you have to make little adjustments, you can. The frame's going to feel tighter and tighter as we go. And let's cut 1.5 feet of 28 gauge. And then we'll just get ourselves set up on this side for some weaving. All right, so 1.5 feet of 28 gauge. And I'm just going to turn these 3 wires. Everything on my stone looks nice. The wires are laying nice on the front. Just going to make sure to hold that, maintain the spacing, and just curve these wires a little bit there so that you're close to that V so that we can wrap in when we're close. You'll anchor with 1 inch here and just repeat what we did over here. So there's 2 wraps on the 2 bottom wires. Then when I come back, I'll go between them and go up for 2 wraps on the upper 2 wires. I'll come all the way down, wrap twice around these 2 bottom wires, but on the second time back through, I'll come between them, go up, do 2 wraps, come all the way down, and I'll repeat until I get close to that V, which should be this next one. There's 2, come between them, do 2 wraps along these 2, and then to make it easy on myself, wrap these 2. I'm going to go ahead and just come from above them, since I'm positioned that way, go all the way through, all underneath all of them, so that I catch those 3 wires. And then since it's still open right here, you can pass back through that top one, come through all of them again to get 2 wraps on it. Come back through this upper one, go all the way through all of them again. So I've got 3 nice wraps right there to hold it on, making sure everything's flat on my stone, and then I'll just continue in this pattern for a few more wraps. I think we did 3, and then I made my loop. 2, come through here and do 2 on this bottom one. 2. And then now with this upper wire, I think I did one more actually. Let me do one more. No, I didn't. Okay. So now with these wires, once I've got 3 stitches going on there, make sure everything is pushed back. Make sure your coil, your weaves are still showing on each edge of the stone. Make sure everything's laying nice and flat. Hold that right there. Bend all 3 wires to horizontal. Just like that. And in this one, the top one, put your thumb right there in that crevice and turn it straight up. You can use a plier if you want to right here, or just put your thumb on it and bring the loop all the way over. Once it gets over, you can get your round nose plier on it. Help turn this entire thing. Alright, and then from here, once I get the loop that I want, I'll just straighten this wire back down, and I'll continue to make a couple of wraps to tie that up and get to where I am on the other side. So there's 2. And I'll just come over here and do 2 around here. come all the way down. I'll do 2, and then I'll do a couple of single wraps. Around that lower one. Okay. Woo, pretty good, you guys. Now we turn to the front, and that should look pretty clean. Your wires are set up. Your stone is captured at this point. So from here, you can do anything. You could turn this into a cuff by, easily weaving on a few more wires or back bending these somehow. You can get imaginative. You can certainly do, another version of Claudia, which is what we're going to do. But I just want to point out that you could take these out and do, really fancy wings and make this into a big, necklace piece if you wanted to. So lots of things that you can do from this capture. And so Claudia was with a much smaller stone, a little round rhodochrosite. And then this one here is using a much larger oval malachite azurite stone. It's beautiful. Okay, so we'll finish this one up in part 2, but hopefully this inspires you for a lot of things, and I will see you soon again for part 2.